Onion Cycles podcast is about thought-provoking, emotion-evoking, action-driven, step-by-step guidance to explore the unique, glorious, and wonderful ocean of your being. Because healing is a multi-layered process of getting to know oneself. Become the self-empowered empiric researcher by discovering the unique layers of your existence. With your host, Nadine Alma, welcome to the Holistic Healing Hub. Welcome to the Onion Cycles podcast.
Another episode. Another wrap-up series episode. Another episode that is packed with information, with tools that are inviting you to try them out. See for yourself what works and what doesn't. Discard what doesn't serve you and take into you what is meant for you, what is meant to be within you, what is meant to shine out into the world. And I am excited about this one. I highly recommend you and invite you to go to my website and download your free workbook because yes, again for this series I sat down and I created a workbook about 20 pages, and in that workbook you have all the notes of what we discussed today, but more importantly, because that is the motto of this podcast, as I think, so I feel, so I act. Meaning, in the action lies the magic. If we don't roll up our sleeves and get to work on ourselves and truly change from within what we deem needs to be changed, nothing will happen. And a change is the only constant in life, we know that. And because that is the only constant in life, it is also the only constant that is within us. So our soul thrives in change. Our soul wants to change. Our soul wants to grow and expand. So the only logical thing to do, if there is something in your life right now that you feel is a little bit off and that you want to get into a direction that feels aligned again, then change is your way to go. And every change, every path of change starts with the first step. And if you chose my podcast today to be that step, I feel truly and genuinely honored. And I thank you very much, everyone tuning in, that you decided to do the noble work, that you decided to take time out of the busyness of our days and dedicate that to yourself, to being open and honest and vulnerable with yourself. And well, here you go. Let's dive straight in. So welcome, my loves. Today's episode, Story 47, episode 49, the wrap-up series, part 3. Today we recap the episode 22 to 36. Wow. And we dive straight into it. The first episode we want to talk about is episode called Joie de Vie. And I combined that episode with an episode we did way later on that is called Redefining Happiness. Why did I do that? Because both tackle the same all-encompassing, all striving towards topic of happiness and what it means. And the first thing we discovered in Joie de Vie is that actually in our society today, personally I believe, and some out there do too, happiness is quite confusing and obviously a very loaded expression. Because what does happiness mean? Obviously it means something else from the outside material world to everyone. But what does it truly mean on the inside? And I myself felt trapped to that for a very long time. I thought happiness was supposed to be up, 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 cheerfulness, joyfulness, all the way smiling and basically, excuse my expression, shitting rainbows. Right. Well, that's not the case, isn't it? Because we don't shit rainbows, do we? So, because that is so, the true essence, some believe, of happiness is actually contentment. It's like a balance within. And the metaphor I would like to give you with that is like a pendulum. So when I was back in hospital and I was trying to get that scattered mosaic that crashed on the floor when I had my burnout and depression and social anxiety, my first ever meditation teacher gave me this metaphor too. He said, it's like a pendulum. You tend to swing all the way to the right. Oh, exultation and happiness and cheerfulness and joy and indulging and partying, and then what does happen? It's a universal law. It goes all the way back to the abyss of your existence and despair and sorrow. So it's like, depending on who you are and how your life looks like, it's a back and forth, back and forth. And every universal law tells us that what we actually strive for is alignment. It's like balance. It's sort of like the stillness of the pendulum. And I'm not quite agreeing with that, because I feel like once you sort of experienced a foundation of knowing what it might look like for you when the pendulum is in stillness and when you are in balance, you sometimes have to go all that way and sometimes have to go all that way, because that is our capacity to feel, and that, I believe, makes us very, very much human. It's the capacity to feel deeply both ways. However, I never want my life to look again only swinging back and forth. Quite like the middle way, quite like the balance. I quite like the stillness and the mindfulness and the horizon and open for me. However, it is obviously you who decides how the pendulum of your life needs to look. Only thing I do is give you that metaphor to sort of dive into that little bit of observing how it is right now and how that middle path could offer a way of being able to recharge and regenerate and sort of give and charge up from an inner source that comes from that alignment, and then give freely from the overflow. And that is why I feel like my happiness and the happiness of a few people I would know tends to look like being aligned, being in balance, and always, whatever comes in life, choosing to see, okay, where is my balance, where is my middle, what do I need to get there in order to make sense of what happened on this side or on that side, right? Now, the second thing we discussed in Joie de Vie was the Maslow hierarchy of needs, and I won't go into that because in the workbook there's like a whole few pages on that and how to work with it. What I will say though is that recently I discovered a video by Christina Lopes where she talks about why we actually may not need to belong, and belonging is quite a big part of the Maslow hierarchy of needs, and we discussed that in a very recent episode, so we will come back to that in our last wrap-up series next week. However, if you feel like I don't really get that notion of needing to belong, I belong to myself, I belong within me, then just scrap out the word belonging and just put love on it, because love is what we are made of, and love is what everyone wants in their life, needs in their life to thrive. That is the only thing I want to mention on the Maslow hierarchy of needs. What we also discussed in Joie de Vie was the essence of Stoicism. So eudaimonia is what it is following, and that is basically the notion that when we can't influence anything around us, the only thing that is worthy focusing on is what we can focus on, what we can influence, and that everything of that is happening within us. And what Stoicism teaches us is not to not feel. It's basically to become the observer of the voice within. So I feel like Stoicism is just another part of mindfulness, really, because it asks us in a moment where a peak emotion comes up, where we really rise to that emotion and we want to get into a reactive state, be it from anger or sadness, it doesn't matter. Coping with both of them gives us that I want to push that feeling down and do something else to distract myself from not feeling it, right? So what Stoicism says is not feeling. What Stoicism does is taking a step back and trying in that moment or after that moment has passed to go deep and observe, where does this emotion come from? Why do I experience that emotion? How can I channel that emotion for the good of all? So it's basically, in essence, asking the question of virtue and of the noble work. It is what I love about this podcast too, because as you know, I tell you all the time, it's about the noble work, because what I am within, I send out into the world, and asking yourself what it is I want to send out into the world, right? So for me, it's this deep strive to wanting to be of service to others with the knowledge I gathered through 10 years of self-exploration, self-realization, self-responsibility, and how that can be joyful, and how that with all the pain, with all the sadness, it might also encompass, it's overall a joyful path, because it enables me to feel a whole sense of who I am and what I want to do in this world and who I want to bring every day to the table of this world. So Stoicism in essence does the same, because it acts as the flagship of being of service to ethics, to morals, to virtues. So whenever you encounter a feeling, maybe you feel called to try that Stoicism out for yourself and see, okay, I feel something, what do I feel? And how is that feeling of service to me right now, showing something that wants to be felt in order to be integrated again? And maybe even how does that feeling enable me to challenge the energy coming from it into doing something good, maybe for others? Because science shows us that if we're depressed, one of the best things is to take care of something else, someone else, a pet maybe, or regularly going to volunteer in a homeless shelter, do something for someone else, because we're so much in our head and concerned with ourselves and how we are perceived in the world, what people think about us, how to become more lovable, if you want. But we rarely ever consider the concept of how can I actually widen my capacity to love, right? So if that resonates with you, lovely exercise in the workbook, check it out. And then we go to redefining happiness, which was another episode. And the three things I want to mention from there were three things that I discovered were holding me back in discovering what my middle path was. And that first thing was the if-then trap. So putting conditions on achieving the state of happiness. So I would say stuff like, well, if I have that dress, I'm gonna feel so good within myself, I'm gonna be happy. Or if I have that boyfriend, I'm gonna be so loved, I'm gonna be happy. If I have this vacation, if I have this job, if I have my mother apologize to me, if I have my friend apologized, if I have anything in the outside world, I tie a condition to that for being happy. And to be honest, I came to realize that really doesn't make any sense. Because firstly, I give my own power away to something in the outside. I give my power to my mom, my friend, the boyfriend I will have, the job I will have, the clothes I will be able to buy, the vacation I will go on. And then secondly, what that entails is that by giving my power away, I feel helpless and I feel like less than I am. And it comes from within. There's no way around it. I'm sorry if I sort of disappoint you on that, but it is hard work and it comes from you. And if you don't find a way to quote the Lord of the Rings. It's a Lord of the Rings season, isn't it? No one will find a way. If you don't find a way to tap into within, tap into the wisdom, tap into the pipe that streams your own happiness, your specific flavor, your specific type of what makes you happy, aligned, and feel contented, no one else will, no matter how hard you try. And I found out that the hard way, because quite a few relationships of mine broke because I tied my happiness to how they behaved, how they reacted to me, how they should show me unconditional love. It's what I wanted. Sometimes I even wanted them to read my mind, to know exactly what makes me happy, even though I didn't know it myself. Because before I went on this path, I never asked myself, what actually, what does make me happy? How do I tick? I was expecting others to know the answer. No way around it. Now I know. Now I don't need to tie it to anything in the outside world anymore. Doesn't mean I don't ask for help. It doesn't mean I don't have friends. It doesn't mean that I want to be happy around people. But it also means that I'm quite able to discern who has my best interest at heart. Who wants me to be their friend because they see me for who I am. I'm not fitting in with them. I'm belonging there. There's a big difference. Because fitting in means you're discarding something from yourself in order to fit into that group, or that, be it a family group or a social group or a work group, whatever. I don't have that anymore. I feel 100% with all of the edges of the diamond that I am, welcome with the people that I give my time to. So in essence, what it does, knowing that it comes from within and not tying it to a condition, not saying if, then, you free yourself and you become that self-empowered, magical butterfly that people then just ask, what is she doing? She seems generally joyful, generally happy with her life. Her life isn't perfect. I, for example, know she doesn't earn money now. I know that she broke up with a boyfriend. I know that he is somehow lost his job, but they radiate out joy. What happened there? And the reason is they don't tie it to condition in the outside. They found that stream within. And that is what freeing yourself from the if-then trap can do for you. The other thing that I found really lovely came from an Instagram. I think it's at James Moore Wellness. Your new for a day comprise 4 happiness hormones, and they are oxytocin, dopamine, serotonin, and endorphins. Dopamine. You complete a task, cherish good food, and nourish yourself with good food, and you get enough sleep. Easy. We should do that every day, shouldn't we? The next one, oxytocin. Give a compliment to someone. Make them happy. Be of service to someone else. Play with animals. Do you have a pet? Or maybe a pet shelter where you can just go for a walk and give some love to a dog or a cat or a parrot. I don't know. Or if you have someone you really love and they love you, hold hands and give a hug that at least lasts 30 seconds. Serotonin. Get outside. Nature, sunshine, and just basically mindfulness, which we learned in the last wrap up. It could be also a ritual at home where you just do your dishes, but be very present doing them and enjoy the warmth of the water and the scent of the liquid and the bubbles. Oh, I love bubbles. And the last one, endorphins, which means creating for the sake of creating something. Laughing, watching a movie, having fun, and just enjoying that humanness that is fueling the joy of life. And with that, we dive straight into another topic, which is the Being Human series. So that was a huge part of our year together. It comprised almost 2 months. And what happened there was I read a book, and that book just inspired me to create this series. The book was Mary Magdalene Revealed, And because we respect all forms of faith in this podcast, it wasn't about faith anyway. It was about what she described in the gospel that had been found about 30, 40 years ago. She described the 7 powers of wrath. And those 7 powers, believe it or not, are what causes all of us pain and suffering and hurt. Obviously, that part of the spectrum of feelings and emotions is necessary for our soul to experience them, to grow, right? Nonetheless, if we know about them, it's so much easier to sort of deal with them as though they're friends and a compass that indicates where it really hurts, where we really need to focus on so that we can evolve, basically. The 7 powers of wrath are darkness, so it's this feeling of numbness, of loneliness, of having no hope, of basically depression. And when I say depression, I don't mean a short-term depression. A short-term depression to me personally is like you have that feeling that there is something that you can't find on the outside, so you retreat. And it may be a week, 2 weeks, or a month, and then you re-emerge into the world because you found something within yourself. And that is, I think, very healthy because it can also be seen in the seasons in nature. And retreating from time to time in yourself to come out a new person and shedding a skin or a layer that doesn't serve you anymore is a very valuable thing. So a short-term depression, I feel like, is part of being human. What is also being part of humanness could be that long-term depression that indicates that we have repressed, suppressed, survived in trauma mode for a very long time, lived in masks, lived with shades of us that aren't us to fit in, to make others happy, lived a life that wasn't ours, right? And then we fall into this because so much energy went into keeping up all of this, so that suddenly depression emerges to rip that out and sort of scrap all of that off. And we tend to have a very deep think, but sometimes we also just feel nothing, and that causes pain and hurt. And that is also partly why I wanted to do this podcast, because my way, my journey, that is still my journey, started 10 years ago. And I feel like once we come to that point, the innermost question that I asked myself, just as a side note, was, do I even want to live? And if that triggers you, and if something within you feels called to go deeper in that feeling, do I even want to live? Do I want to be here? Then what I want to respectfully hand over to you is to ask yourself the question, but also ask for help. Reach out to anyone. If it be a third party that has no knowledge of your life and you feel safe opening up with them, a therapist, a professional, then please do that. It is not to take lightly to ask yourself the question, wait a minute, do I even want to be here? However, I also don't want to deny that this question should, for me personally, not be met with disgust or with overly perceived drama. Because when I asked myself the question, do I want to live, for the majority of my life, it was no. And then I asked myself the question seriously for the first time when I was about 26. And then I did a vision quest, is what they do. It's an indigenous practice where you go out into the wilderness without anything for 4 days and 4 nights. And obviously there was some sort of supervision, because that is a retreat that has a program of 21 days where they guide you through the process. But in those 4 days outside, being not human, just being, I came to the conclusion that yes, actually I want to live. And I think that was the turning point for me. Doesn't mean to say that there weren't moments in my life since then when I thought, well, it would quite be easier to just not deal with the hatred outside in this world, to just not deal with the anxiety and the angst and the fear that is everywhere and that is sort of sucking the life out of me. However, I decided that no, I'm made of love and I came here for a reason. I know that for sure. And even if I don't know that reason or that purpose right now, I consciously decide and choose life. That is just a side note. So please seek help, ask for help, get some help, and answer that question for yourself. Why is it you don't want to fully commit to this life? And if you find your way to the answer that, well, actually, I do want to live that life, then please live it to the fullest and do whatever sparks joy within you. And that obviously also I want to give to those who say they are not sure if they want to live. There is a spark within you, even if layers of conditioning and belief systems and patterns have covered it up. Even if you feel like you're the person that is the most alone and no one understands you, I see you and I understand you. And there is a light within you. And you came here with that light. And you came here to shine that light. So maybe you want to just ask yourself the question and take on the responsibility of life and the responsibility of being alive consciously and for yourself before you're actually able to uncover what is within you. And I wish you all the best and I send you all the love. So let's move on. The second power of wrath, what she calls them, is desire. And when she says desire, and when she tells us about all of those seven powers, in balance, there is no problem with any of them. Because in balance, they always give us a notch. They always give us that nudge to work on ourselves and to see that we integrate what has been fragmented, right? So with desire, she's just saying it's okay to have a desire. It's also very important to have a desire. If I hadn't had the desire to create this podcast, there wouldn't be a podcast. And if I wouldn't create that podcast, maybe one person out there listening to that podcast wouldn't have heard a message that made their day or made their hour or whatever it was. I humbly don't know. I would love to know if you want to share. But that is what she's saying, is desire in essence isn't bad. It becomes bad if it's an attachment, if it gets to the point where we put a condition to our happiness. So if we say only if we reach that goal, the if-then trap we talked about, then I can be happy. Now the third one is ignorance. And I believe there are a lot of ignorant people, and I would count myself to that ignorant people too. Why? Because I feel like, in essence, we all are ignorant. We all have blind spots. There is an ignorance that is protective, that serves us. So if you don't know it, then you might just endure it in a way that makes it easier for you to unpack all of that later in your life. Obviously, if you repeat a cycle over and over again as an adult, you might want to have a closer look, because you will recycle that cycle as often until you learn that there is something to learn there and to evolve from. So ignorance in essence can be protection, but obviously ignorance in essence can also mean that you are being in a reactive state of mind, spreading the feeling that you have within. So when I was manipulative and I just was miserable, I sometimes consciously, mostly unconsciously, put everyone around me in misery too. Because if I don't feel like I'm happy, no one else has the right to feel happy. They all need to feel like I do. So hurt people hurt people. And that comes from not only the part of anger, it also comes from a certain ignorance, because we are not self-reflecting then. We're not reflecting on sharing and feeling our emotions. What we focus on is actually saying everyone else has to feel the way I do, because I have a right to spread what I feel, when in essence you have a right to feel it, you have a right to explain it, you have a right to sort of protect your boundaries if the ignorance came from someone putting a trigger on you, but you don't have any right to spread it at all. It's your deal, it's your gift to dive deep and discover what is it that doesn't feel right now. Why are we not in balance? The next one is seal for death. What that means is that anything we do that endangers our longevity. So anything we do that endangers our longevity, it is a silent suicide, is what you can call it. It is if I overeat, right? I'm not doing my body a favor, and in essence, if I do it every day and if I do it in excess, then that will lead to obesity, and it will lead to blood sugar highs, and it will lead to diabetes. It will lead to illness. It will lead to me not living the life with the length that I could have if I would be responsible and act responsibly toward my body. There are obviously other ways, so anything in excess and that isn't in balance is a seal for death. Our choices that impair our longevity. The next one, the realm of the flesh. And here we have a topic where, again, in essence, there is nothing wrong with it. If you're a lustful person, that could be such a triumph of getting your body back and getting a feeling for your body back and enjoying your body again after years and even decades of hating your body and being abusive towards your body, of eating a meal without thinking about the calories or the scale the next morning, right? Of really loving those carbs and spaghetti and that bread and everything. Lustful person, it's not in essence bad. It just becomes bad when that is the only thing we're about. So if we overindulge in it, because what it leads to is forgetting that we're also spiritual and that we have a responsibility that is bigger than us, because bigger than us as in 4 bodies. Remember in the last episode we talked about that, the ethereal bodies, the energetic bodies around us. We are eternal beings living a human experience. So therefore, if we're just living the human experience and forgetting the eternal part, there is an imbalance again. And remember, everything in the universe tries to get into balance again. So it will lead you to become unfulfilled and unhappy ultimately if we just focus on the material goods of the earth, if you want to call it that way. And it leads also to the next thing with it, which is the foolish wisdom of the flesh. That means the wisdom of the flesh being that our body most of the times knows exactly what we need. I know exactly when I have the energy and when my body would crave a yoga session, but also foolish, right? Because I don't do it. Because what I do then is doom scroll and binge eat. So I use my body as a scapegoat, right, for my vices. I mistreat my body for coping mechanisms. Not saying anyone who does that is a bad person. We didn't learn how to cope with our feelings, but that is why we sit right here and talk about it, right? What it means is that the foolish wisdom of the flesh is sort of that reluctance of doing what's right. The reluctance of knowing that is what I would need right now. A refreshing, wonderful salad, a cooked meal that I did, that I didn't buy takeaway or some processed food or some cereal or whatever, or a yoga session, a run, a workout in the gym. That is what I want. That is what I need. That is what I deep within, I know, yes, I crave that. That is what I need. However, I have a reluctance to do that. Instead, I just sit here and binge doom roll and binge eat something that is absolutely not healthy. I feel like that voice of our body, the voice of the soul is another story, but the voice of our bodies has gone so quiet and it's just a whisper these days. So it took me about 3 years of making myself promises that I wanted to stick to and I wanted to honor them, right? For example, I did 1 year of yoga every single day because I built up to that I started with something that was easy with me, so I wrote a journal every single day for a year, and then I did meditation every single day for a year. So I was sort of building a new relationship to discipline and to consistency, and how that could be beneficial, and how it actually is an expression of self-love. We discussed it in the first wrap-up series, so if you feel called to do so, listen to that. But what I did was build up the consistency so that I know I could trust myself. I know I love myself enough to honor that promise. And through that year of yoga, I realized that there's actually a whisper. And I wasn't able to hear that whisper before. Sometimes it was just brushing me. It was like, I would love to cook, but no, I'm just gonna go to McDonald's. That kind of thing. But now, in these days, I think because of the process and the work I put in, I am able to quite clearly hear when my body craves yoga, for example. There are days when I come home after doing a lot and knowing, okay, I'm gonna have dinner in an hour, I'm gonna put that on the stove. It probably needs about 40 minutes. I could do yoga. Yes, I could do yoga. And then there are days when I have the exact same situation and I don't do yoga and do something else. And I know after eating, I sometimes do my yin yoga and a more relaxed form of yoga, but I still know that actually I would have wanted to do it before eating so that I can really exercise, really stretch, and really get the most out of that practice and out of doing the practice on my own terms. So what I'm trying to say here in so many words is that it is beneficial to start a relationship with your body and get back to hearing the voice of your body. Which leads me to the last part of this 7 Powers of Wrath human being series that we did. So what I want to say here is, again, is wisdom, because wrath and anger, there's a wisdom there. You can be angry when someone else is bullied and you stand up in your morals, in your virtue, stand up for them. Rebellions have been made because of unjust behavior. And it also gives you an indication of when your boundaries are violated, and you need to stand up for yourself and you need to state clearly, this wasn't all right, this wasn't okay, right? However, foolish, because it goes with the same signature of ignorance. Foolish if done reactively. So if done without thinking about, you are absolutely in your right to feel it. However, you are not in your right to spread it. And that is where the foolish wisdom comes in. So to wrap all of this up, the Being Human series was about discovering what it means to be human in the whole circle of the spectrum. So from one side where it is very, very good to be wrathful, for example, to let it out, to confess that your boundary has been violated, all the way to the other part of the circle spectrum where it's like, maybe not now, maybe I think about it, maybe I'll just go within and see where that wrath actually comes from and not be reactive, right? So it's like the whole Being Human series was about accepting so many different struggles that we encounter every day of our lives, and seeing that is what makes us human, and looking at them opens up this portal of self-responsibility and accountability, enabling us to become a fuller, more holistic version of ourselves, because we are invited to look and go deeper and heal integrate, and from heal integrating, becoming that fuller version of us and becoming more in alignment of what it actually is that the spark within us defines, right? And the last episode we're gonna discuss today was the episode Regeneration. Why, you ask? Because up to that point, when I came across that article in a German magazine, the magazine is called Herzstück, so translated it would be something like heart piece. And in that article, the journalist taught me that regeneration is as complex as any other part of relationship building with anything else, because there are different kinds of regeneration. Up to that point, regeneration for me looked like putting my feet up and not doing nothing but watching videos, watching movies, eating, and just being lazy. So my kind of regeneration equaled laziness, right? And there is a time for laziness. But what different kinds of regeneration teach us is that you don't always need to be lazy, because there are 7 different kinds of regeneration. There is emotional regeneration, social regeneration, spiritual regeneration, creative regeneration, physical regeneration, which equals lying on the couch sleeping, something like that, mental and sensory regeneration. So, what do they mean? Emotional regeneration means if you suppress and repress all of your emotions because you're conditioned to think that it is actually bad and weak and dangerous to be vulnerable, then emotional regeneration might be for you. And that is simply the task of finding your authentic self and being real. That might offend people, that might even offend yourself when you see the truth and have to discover all the not so nice looking parts of yourself, when you realize that healing integrating is actually not a linear journey, but it's actually very curvy and it might very much get nasty and naughty. But essentially, emotional regeneration is just taking time and realizing that who am I? Why am I feeling this? When did I feel this the last time? When did I feel this the first time? So if you're interested in that, check out the emotional body healing video by Teal Swan, where she dives into how to sort of heal and integrate fragments that are stored in our emotional body. And if you're interested in what is the emotional body, go back to the 4-body series I did earlier this year. Mwah! Would love for you to dive into that topic. Physical regeneration then is what we discussed in the foolish wisdom of the flesh. It's like we lost our connection to our body. So in essence, physical regeneration is tapping into what our body needs and trying to hear the whispers that our body wants, the signals that our body wants to send us. And that is relationship building. So it might look like you reading for a whole day on a sofa. It might actually be you having a run for the first time in your life because you hear the need for your body craving exercise. It could also look like a qigong session. It can look like yoga. It can look like anything that is connected to your body and that you find out once you sit in stillness and try to really reconnect with your body. You can even talk to it, right? But how you do it, it's up to you. But physical regeneration, very important, building a connection with your own body and hearing its voice again and having space for what it tells you, what it needs. Mental regeneration. I don't know how about you, but from the moment an alarm clock in the morning gets off, so our nervous system getting dysregulated from the moment we wake up by an alarm waking us up, to the moment we step outside or even have stress inside to get ready to get to work. Moment we step outside and the traffic is loud and there are pedestrians and there is so much hustle, there's so much energy, there's so much noise. Then you go to your workplace, there's noise again, and your brain processes all of this just on the side. Just, oh, I can do this. And then you come home and then you ask yourself, why am I feeling fatigue? Why am I dead? Why am I stressed? Why am I anxious? Because all day, every day, you're bombarded with outside distractions and noises, and that fills you up. So what mental regeneration would look like is basically letting go and just being in the now. Just radically turning off your phone for 20 minutes or whatever you want to start with, and not focusing on anything else but what happens in the present moment. You could think of it as an experiment and rediscovering parts of yourself. things that you like to do as a kid, for example. It's like really finding out what your moment in the now should look like so that you can benefit from it. Spiritual regeneration. Ooh, the discussion about spirituality and what it is. Let me tell you, spirituality is nothing else than you getting to know the universe within you and being able to emanate that beautiful universe into the outside world by whatever you came here to bring. Shining your light, basically. But first you have to find your light. And first you have to sort of discover what your light consists of, right? And spiritual regeneration is needed when you have lost faith in humanity, when you have lost faith in yourself, when you have lost the faith of purpose, when you're just functioning and being an automaton and just doing your to-do list and doing your task and your responsibilities, and the rest of the time you just sort of numb yourself with coping mechanisms and you're not really enjoying life or seeing the magic of life anymore, right? So spiritual regeneration looks like being brave and being a seeker for the sake of seeking. And that doesn't mean that any faith is off limits. That doesn't mean that any book that is holy is off limits. That doesn't mean that you just need to stick with one thing. On the contrary, spirituality is a mosaic as you are. You're a mosaic of fragments of self, of experiencing things and situations and people, and spirituality is the same. What does work for you? What resonates with you? Take that. And what doesn't, it's not for you. It doesn't mean it's bad, doesn't mean you're bad. It doesn't need to be in your life right now. However, when you're curious, when you stay curious, and when you just dive into new books and new experiences, and just for the sake of seeking, visit a temple of Buddhists, for example, if you have one in your area, or if you're invited into a dinner with Christians, or if you are invited into the woods because someone does a drum session there and there is woo going on, as some people would call it, with dances and full moon rituals, and if you feel called to participate in a Celtic ritual, it doesn't matter what it is. Just do it and explore, because that is where your soul comes into play. Your soul thrives when you try out new things, because even though our brain wants to be stagnant and doing the same thing over and over again, because that is how we know we're safe and how it works, and thank you brain for doing that, but every once in a while, especially if you've lost your faith, if you've lost to see the sense in things, then your soul needs to be the captain of your sail right now, and your soul needs to lead you to new experiences, because your soul strives and grows through experiences. So spiritual regeneration looks like I'm gonna try out everything that I ever wanted to do, and it might even just be dancing, which goes into physical regeneration too, because you're building a relationship with your body. But it could also be that all of these regenerations somehow, like the four bodies, are linked to each other and bleeding into each other and communicating with each other. So just make sure, if you've lost faith in anything and if you don't feel joy anymore, to maybe get up and do something for your soul, so that your soul has air again underneath its wings. Then we have social regeneration, and it is like the word already indicates. There are people out there who just drain you, and sometimes we're not even aware of them draining us. We just go to meet them because we've known them for years or decades, or because it's a must do, or whatever they tell us it is. But there are people who drain us, and there are people who trigger us, which is a difference. People who trigger us are giving us a gift, the gift of looking deep. Doesn't mean we always want to be triggered, so you don't always need to go to that person again. You also don't have to go to that person if you don't want to be triggered, because your life is too much right now anyway. However, there are also people who just drain us. They don't even trigger us, they just drain us. And it is for you to decide how to live your life. Obviously, from my own personal experience, I would just say there's no way I'm gonna spend my energy on people who don't appreciate that energy and who just suck and drain my energy. I want to be around people who give me energy so that when I part with them again, I don't need to retreat for a week in my home to recover, because life is short and I really don't want to spend the time on that. I want to spend the time on being energized, right? So, social regeneration asks of us a very brave path, the path of no lies anymore, plain truths. Who drains you, who doesn't, and what are you going to do with those who drain you? You're going to be brave, you're going to be authentic, you're going to not lie to yourself or them, and maybe even help them by not lying anymore and help yourself as well. It's up to you. Then we have sensory regeneration, and sensory regeneration basically just means that there is an overwhelm, and it could look like you're not even able to taste food anymore without putting so much seasoning in. It could also look like getting a migraine from someone who has a lot of perfume on. It could look like a lot of things, but what it indicates is that you just need to detox, retreat. Retreat into the woods if you want, into a retreat center where there are no sensory influences anymore. No social media, no people around you, no masses of people around you, I would say, and just no distractions that cause any more harm to your senses. Because then you can regain the senses because you're not constantly overflowed and overwhelmed by them. And lastly, we have creative regeneration. And that means nothing else as spiritual regeneration meant, in a sense of exploring your creativity. Now, creativity often is connected to artists. Oh, I'm not an artist, I can't be creative. Every single one of you out there, I don't care what you want to tell me, every single one out there is creative. Because creative means nothing else than creating. And if you're a teacher, you are creating. Thirst for knowledge and give knowledge, offer knowledge, invite people to be as curious as you are. If you are an engineer, you're also curious and you're also creating something. If you are, I don't know, if you're a cook, you're creating meals, you're an artist in the kitchen. Everyone is an artist in their own way, right? And creative regeneration is basically remembering what sparks joy within us, that then creates something for the sake of creating, not for the sake of showing it, not for the sake of making a living off of it, not for the sake of proving something to someone else, but maybe for proving something to yourself, that you indeed can take up a brush and it doesn't need to look perfect, it doesn't need to be a Van Gogh, it just needs to be your brand, your special brand of, I took time to myself to create a picture with watercolors. Just that. Or I took up pottery. I took a dance class. I expressed myself in a short essay. I will never show the essay, but I did it, right? It's for the sake of creating and rediscovering that so much of the essence of being human, of that flow that happens when you create something and works through you, has been lost to being taught that it is something that is restricted to your free time. I mean, just think about the prejudice of an artist is poor. An artist will never make money. Someone telling their family, I want to be an artist, I want to make music, I want to be a writer, I want to be a painter. And the first reaction rarely ever is, wow, you're holding up the flagship of what humanness is all about, what humanity is all about, the virtue of essence of creation. You are doing the noble work. No, most of them are, well, wait, that can be your hobby. It surely can't comprise all of your life. When in essence, I don't think being a worker in a factory is what the essence of life is all about. It's a system that created that paradigm, that we have to exchange our time and energy for money to survive, and everything that doesn't go into that goal of making money is actually something that is more of like a hobby and doesn't need to be taken serious. And I think there's a change going on. I think that will change completely because, after all, we are in a revolution where AI soon will take over all those jobs. So, what comprises your essence and your spirit? What makes you happy? What do you want to create? And that is creative regeneration. Ah, well, another podcast with so much information. And I am so grateful for doing this podcast and these wrap up series, because the first wrap up series was all about building a vocabulary so that we know what we're talking about when we go further on. The second recap was all about building a relationship with yourself, with going within and finding the tools and trying out the tools to discover who lies there, who's waiting to be discovered and let loose in the world around you. And then the third, the one we did today, was all about discovering the humanness of things. What is it that makes us human? And how are we to decide if something is beneficial for a journey or not? Of balancing the eternal being that is living the human experience. So the wrap-up series is just an honor and a pleasure to do, because it sort of ties everything in together and it makes this beautiful woven fabric of, we are basically learning the school of life, and that is just so beneficial for anyone who just wants to be curious, who wants to discover who they are in this world, what their place could be, how that could look like, but also for anyone who's never ever taken time to themselves to find out who they really are in within. So I thank you with all my heart that you joined again today, because this really is something special. You took time out of your day and dedicated a slot to yourself, just for the sake of being with you and finding a closer relationship, building a closer relationship with yourself. So I appreciate that a lot, and it is very brave. And I hope that in this nearly hour of podcast, I hope that in this episode there was something for you to take away that was beneficial to your journey, to your next step, to your next thought, your next feeling, and your next action-based step. And with that said, again, the workbook, I'm so proud of this. I just loved it. So if you feel called to do so, download the workbook for free on my website, www.wonderfinder.org. We will see each other in part 4 next week. And until then, I send you from my little corner of the world, with my heart wide, wide open, all the love, all the energy that I have right to you. And I see you, I love you, I understand you, and I'm looking forward to the next time spent with you. All the best, my beloved fellow healing, integrating onions.